But this is sort of part 2 of a presentation I gave at the last BuildSA, which I titled 3D Defects, an all-purpose Dynamo findy thing, because at the time I had no idea where this was going to go, or if it was going to work, or if there would be a part 2. But we did it, or I say we, Luke did it. And so to give some context for those who weren't here last time, this was the problem that we had that we asked Luke to solve. And I guess before I go forward, what I'll say is part of the point here is that I do not understand how to solve this problem. So we've been working with Luke to help solve this problem. And this is, I guess, part of going back to Toby's presentation about, giving out information without expecting much back. I guess that's kind of our philosophy of what we do a lot. That's kind of the point of all these sessions too. But really, this was going to Luke and saying, Luke, how do we do this? And him saying, I don't know, I guess we can sort of figure it out. But by the way, if I figure it out, I'm going to give it to whoever I want. I'm not sure. That's okay. It sounds great. Everyone kind of wins, So this is what we're doing today. We're really just giving it to everybody else. So this was the problem. And I guess what Luke has done is not solve this particular problem, but give us a generic solution that solves lots of problems. All right. Now, the issue is this, that we use Revizto a lot as a tool in the office, and we're using it more and more, and we're now getting contractors to get into there as well. And we've decided that a while ago, we sort of took Revizto from the design and coordination phase into the construction phase. So I've used it on site with builders for kind of, doesn't quite replace RFIs, but it helps manage that process. And we do a lot of regional work too, so we can talk online through Revizto, and they can discuss ideas and that kind of stuff. But now we use it for defects management, and now we're also using it for some facilities management as well. And we're really using Revizto stamps to track things with pre-configured conditions on sites for varying conditions, right? In defects, it's about problems. In FM, it's about status. And what Revizto does really well is track it really quick and give you good images like this, three-dimensional sort of, here is the space, here are all the issues and problems, right? So the wins were, sorry, I'll go back on here. The wins were, like I said, speed. You could go and do it really quick, right? And it was trackable and everything else, but the cons were a few. The one con was the Revizto environment is not quite a closed shop, but unless you own Revizto, you can't get in there and play with it. So some of our clients, at least in the FM side of things, they don't always want to purchase this, and it really isn't what they do, right? That's okay. But the other downside was, if I want to get that data out of Revizto, what it loses is its understanding of where it belongs, not in a three-dimensional space, but what it can't say out of the box is, right, this issue belongs in a room, whatever, on level, whatever, in building, whatever, right? And so a lot of contractors and also clients want to say, sure, this issue is great, but I operate in a space-based environment by room name or title or building or asset or whatever, okay? So our issue was, Luke, how do we get this data was really, really helpful out of Revizto and tell it where it belongs, right? And he said, that's easy. All you do is you ask it to, extrapolate its three-dimensional coordinates and map it to another database full of, blah, blah, blah. Holy shit, I don't understand how to do that. So how do you do that? And he went and said, just put like this. It's really straightforward. So what I'm going to do is, to end by blabbering, is talk about the fact that basically Luke has sorted this out. The bad and the ugly have been removed and replaced with this stuff. I will preface this by saying, I guess you need to kind of understand a little bit about how Dynamo works and things like that. But if you do, I don't know, Luke, I guess this is accessible in some format in the universe you're operating in. I know Luke publishes a lot of this gear up to his own libraries and that kind of stuff. So if this is exciting stuff, maybe get in touch with Luke and ask him how to get access to this gear. But what he's going to try and show you is how you do what I just described. How do you start relating Revizto data to spatial data coming out of Revit? But the principle being, this can kind of apply to other things as well, taking data from one bit of software and another one and mapping them together to ask it to do other things, right? So anyway, Luke, is that a good enough introduction for yourself? I can hand over to you now.
Yep, sounds good, mate.
All right, here we go. Let's try this out.
All right, so am I live on the screen?
You're live, I can see it.
Okay, cool. So just very big picture again, along with what Stuart just said. Most of the problems that I see these days are some version of this, where a project has a lot of different platforms operational, and you want to try and wire things together and get a job done. And as I said, most of the problems I'm looking at, I'm thinking, how can I achieve that? And so that's why we went out, we built DeepSpace as an engine for wiring these things together. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later. So back to Stuart's problem. First thing is, Revizto has the iPad app. So we've got the iPad app on the screen there. I don't know if you can see me and the iPad app at the same time. But basically we can, walk around on site, and Stuart and his team have done this, and using the Revizto stamps, they've essentially captured, conditions of a space using either the drawing or the model. So as you know, like Revizto stores the model and the drawings, you can take it out on site. I think in this particular case, they either zoomed in on the drawing and then tapped the stamp list here and said, that's a flooring or something, and tap on the model to record the condition at that location. Or you could use the jump to 3D button, which is kind of up to the top right of the screen, little 3D icon, and then you could tap on a particular room, put yourself in that room, grab your stamp, maybe we're recording the ceilings or something again, and drop the stamp on there. And then we can also attach a photo immediately with Revizto. So with the iPad app, you could be capturing conditions. So the actual application of that, can be used for pre-construction, condition kind of reporting like this, or even, other FM kind of uses downstream, right? So we're capturing things on site. Along with all of that is Stuart's team working away in Revit, right? So those guys are modeling away here. They're federating or merging models together and pushing them into Revizto. That's the models and the drawings that we're seeing on the iPad app. And as we said before, they basically want to use the room kind of space information in Revit here, along with some Revizto stuff, to get an answer for their client. So while we're in Revit here, we've got our brand new DeepSpace plugin. We can do interesting things like syncing that project up to the cloud, pushing all the data straight up into the the cloud environment, and we can do spatial detection and all kinds of things directly with DeepSpace. But we've also got automations, and a lot of our automations are achieved through Dynamo. So let's have a look at how we solved this particular problem. I'll open up Revizto on the PC. So we're looking at the same list of issues on the computer version here, and we can export those issues out. So we can export all of the issue data out to Excel. And it was really cool to see, Toby and Imbi's tech stack there, where they've got Revizto and Power BI. They're probably leveraging some, version of exporting the data to Excel and reading it into Power BI. Now we've kind of added DeepSpace to that mix as well, and we've got a script that rips this issue data out, puts it into a cloud database, and we can address it, along with all the model information in DeepSpace. So we've got this here, we've exported it to Excel, and we've got our Dynamo script running here, on top of that particular Revit model. So what does it do? As Stuart said, once we get into Dynamo world, people sometimes just see a bunch of squiggly lines and it doesn't mean much. But big picture side of things, we're taking, tabular data from Revizto. We're looking for the position or the location of an issue, and then we're going to do stuff with it in Revit. So in Revizto, they haven't kind of gone out of their way to make this easy. This is a single cell which has all the positional camera info, in it, and we had to basically unpack that in Dynamo, right? So what does it do? It reads the Excel data in, and then it has a single node here which unpacks that cell that we were just looking at, and basically turns it into a Revit point that's been translated into the correct coordinates. Then we have two other things going on once it finds the point. One is, well, why don't we drop a family at that point and then maybe set some parameters? And the other one is, yay, we've got the point, let's use the Revit room spaces and figure out, what actual locations those issues exist at. Because as Stuart said, those issues, Revizto doesn't have room spatial detection. So, never run a live demo, but let's do it. We'll hit run. So basically, it's eating that Excel file. It's finding the points. It should all in the same run drop the families into Revit, and it should also figure out basically the spatial locations of those, and we'll see. So I initially built this to run across all the issues in the project. So there was about 700 odd issues in Revizto. Oh, 2,000. Yeah, so it was a lot, and just in that particular Dynamo that I've got running there in the background, I had it set basically to just work off the sample data set that we exported. So it was all running on my other screen 2 seconds ago. So hopefully it gets the job done.
We'll cross fingers for you, Luke.
No, it's always, you move stuff from one screen to another and then Dynamo decides to crash or something, all kinds of exciting things can happen. But yeah, so that's what happens. It basically drops the families there. It does its spatial detection, and we've got it all in Revit in that environment. So let's.
Hey, look, while that's sort of spinning, did you want to do a quick sort of 2-second talk about when that spits it out, how you then start to map that in some kind of format you can distribute?
Yeah, so we then basically take data and we put it into a web interface for kind of consumption in various ways. So we've got here basically our deep space kind of web app, and we create little interfaces for individual clients. So in this particular case, we plan to make an FM kind of portal where you could basically go to particular elements, browse, maybe by department, by room, view the issues in that room, and then we can wire that together with some life cycle costing type information and go from there. So that's the plan. So meanwhile, in the background, this has all finished its job. So in Dynamo world, you can see kind of it's got points, and they're in Dynamo space. And then we've used a place family instance node to drop this issue sphere. Now there are add-ins and tools and stuff that do something similar, but the thing is that we've built this essentially for free, on top of tools that are already available, and you can adapt it to your specific needs, right? So we drop the family there. We only set 2 parameters in this example. We set the issue ID. So the little number we're seeing on top of the orb is the actual ID of that issue. We also set the status. And so when it's red there, basically it's coloring by status using a Revit filter. And we could set up all of our statuses to colorize, in Revit these items. We could do other interesting things like set a hyperlink from here to jump back into Revizto from the orb. But the real thing that kind of Stuart wanted and didn't have before was this, a list of issue IDs and the room spaces that they exist in. So we've got the IDs and the room spaces. We'll now basically push that to deep space and join the Revizto data that you've captured on site with some of this Revit information and the room space, and create, a customized kind of FM view of this project that gives the client, what they need. So that is a basic overview of that little Dynamo script, Stuart.
That's awesome. And just for people's information, I guess, where why this stuff sort of fascinates me as well is, this started with a real simple conversation about a year ago. A client saying, "Can you do this?" I said, "Sure, we can do this, no worries." And then went back and thought about it and thought, "Oh, I'm not entirely sure I know how to do this, but I know someone who does." And so we've chatted to Luke back and forward. And what's come out of this is this tool which does a task which we've asked it to do. But really, for me, this now generates an interface which will help us manage almost anything that Revit generates. We have to speak to an external user, which is manufacturers, suppliers, clients, builders, anybody. You can start mapping the data we use to coordinate and deliver projects with the technical stuff we produce to issue documentation into an interface which can really extrapolate anything out of those two and form a relationship. And yeah, it's exciting. It's really amazing, and I think it changes what we're able to do as a business, and but also changes our skill sets and the conversations, everything. It's kind of these sort of fundamental type game changer moments for me, which is really cool. Okay, well, Luke, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and thank you to everybody, all the presenters, Toby, John. I think it's gone pretty well. There's been no technical glitches, which is great. We've got a couple of minutes left, and we actually have a question. Well done, John. So there's a question from John about how does Revizto deal with exterior defects, no rooms out there, or do you create rooms outside? That's a good question, John. So I guess my take on it, yes, we've created rooms outside that only make kind of sense to us, I guess, and maybe the client. But I'd be interested to know, Luke, if you have any thought about is there any other way you might do that, or is that the only way you manage that external space?
As in outside the building, right? That's kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we would do in that situation is probably set tags or create a stamp that embeds that data as you place it. So within the stamp settings, you could create a stamp that says, external space 1, and it could even be pre-tagged with the space that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as you drop that stamp outside the building, it's going to adopt all of that metadata, and then you can create your reports based on, just show me the external issues, or just show me the ones in Atrium 1, or whatever it is.
So what you mean is that rather than say, I need to find the room name, I'll just look for the stamp and say some other parameter that says it's west elevation or facing east, or it's the so-and-so garden, and I'll use that for that location instead. Yeah,
and the reason I say that is because outdoors, you don't normally have a huge number of different names spaces. If you do, you could do exactly what Stuart's done, which is create a bunch of Revit room spaces and kind of run a spatial detection still. Because Revit rooms can still exist outside a building, if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, you're right. But it can get tricky, can't it? If you've got a big site or a very generic or ambiguous boundaries between external spaces, that gets hard. Yeah. I guess the beauty of it, though, the way you've described it, Luke, is, and I guess that's what you're getting at before, this kind of these internal hacks, is because Revizto is kind of on the fly too. We find that while we're placing these stamps, while a lot is pre-configured, you get there and realize, oh, well, I forgot this space, or I didn't think of this condition. So you could actually have a pre-configured solution to say, well, we've got the external rooms, but while I'm on site, this isn't right. I'm going to create some tags on the fly with stamps. And I guess then if the Dynamo script is right, you can say, well, I want to pull from both. And then Deep Space is basically smart enough to say where there are gaps, purge out the gaps, and still mash that together so that it works as a cohesive unit at the end of it all.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Okay, well,